Hello everyone, so this is a partially torn down gearbox from a Volkswagen Beetle. It does have the longer 1-2 rod, but it does have the earlier pinion bearing. We still have the 3/4 shift fork bolt in. See here, along with the fork, and the reverse mechanism is partially here, the brass cradle piece, as I call it's gone, and this is still there. So what I do to get it ready for further disassembly, as you can see the nuts are already off. We're going to get this stuff off. Just basically, a lot of how my press tooling works is just, I need these out. So you do have to take these bolts all the way out. The reverse one's a little shorter than the shift forks. If you have this up and you're pushing down on the bench, it's easier. Try and give you some of the best views I can. Sometimes they are kind of a little, just burred up is really the only way to explain it. We're going to get that out. So now you can start knocking out these rods, but to do that we need to come around here and look at the front side, and specifically in this view, here's reverse. I can tell that reverse is in the neutral position because it's touching. So from there, kind of compare. This shaft is even with it, so this one's in the neutral position. This one's actually shifted into third. So because of the interlocks, you can't take this rod out first. You take this one out or that one out because the interlock only works between adjacent rails. So what I typically do is have a dull tip punch or a flat tip punch, whatever you want to call it. This tool, normally you're going to shift that into fourth. So I can go around on you a little bit. Get it out so far, and you can pull it. So that's the side. Now, depending on how worn they are, it's how easy it's going to slide for you. Now the thing you want to watch out for now, I'd like to get this out of my way just because it's annoying me. There you go. So not only will that fall off, the balls, I haven't seen any of the balls drop. So there's balls that work with springs into these little notches. Oops, sorry, these. That's what's, neutral and reverse. And then here's where the interlock comes. So a little oval shaped guy goes in here when the other rod moves. We'll push that in. That's what locks us in. Did you notice there's no balls on the workbench? So there's 2 of them. There's 3 of those and 3 ovals. There's that. On the ovals, on a bus box, they won't fall out as you move it. They're too long. A Beetle box, they can just, they're short enough that they do it, but there's 2 of those little guys and 3 of the balls, so you don't want to miss those. You need that when you go to put it back together. So now, what you do, so I'm going to rotate it towards you. Let's take off this post. You usually just use an opening wrench. They can be kind of tight, so just whack or two with the hammer. Now, some people are pretty big about measuring exactly how this is before they take it apart. I typically don't. My reasoning for that is usually what I like to do with the reverse setups is this is going to be rotated so there's not just tons of play on this end. And you'll see that when you're setting your forks, is this cradle is going to sit against the reverse gear and the shaft. Now you don't want this flexing in so it creates a lot of friction, but I don't want it sloppy either. So typically when I'm adjusting reverse, my first step is I'm going to rotate this in and then I'm going to lock that. You know, there is a factory spec for this, so I set it to the middle of the factory spec, and then the final adjustment, I want that in the right rotation for the reverse. So I really don't measure these when I'm taking it apart. Just my personal preference. If your personal preference is to measure it, I recommend measuring it. So right now this is ready to go for my press setup because I'm using a wooden piece. I actually like this better than the factory setup. The factory setup uses a piece of metal with a small back and there's nothing underneath it. When I press out the main shaft, both these shafts are just going to drop onto a wood bottom. I've taken apart a lot of transaxles with this and there's a little wood scarring up top, but it's still working great. The factory piece is metal. It doesn't have the bottom. It has two pins on either side. Some guys you'll see that are experienced with them, they'll recommend taking out one of those pins because it'll, they say if you don't and you're pressing really hard, it'll want to break the gear carrier because it can't slide on either one of the faces. So just take out one pin that locates on one side. It can slide on the other so you don't break the gear carrier. When you're pressing, you gotta watch out for this reverse fork. It can't come out until you press it. I always put the pinion on the inside. You know, if worst case scenario, I'd rather drop the main shaft than the pinion shaft. So when you're putting this down, kind of make for that. And this one's kind of battered and abused, so it sits in there pretty good. But just you can maybe see that fork's wiggling, or at least hear it wiggling. So now when I press on the main shaft, the bigger of the two, both these shafts will come out. If this one doesn't have a nut, let me see here. So this is the pinion shaft, will be on the bottom of the gear carrier. This is your main shaft. It's got the bigger bearing. Take off the clips or take off the nuts. If there's a nut on this one, take it off. If there's a clip on it, leave it there. So next we'll show you how to press these apart.